The order meant to humiliate. The oldest tavern in the capital had stood for centuries, its thick wooden beams darkened by smoke, secrets, and spilled ale. Merchants, soldiers, nobles, and travelers gathered beneath its flickering candlelight, believing themselves anonymous in the crowd. Voices overlapped, boasts, complaints, laughter, cruelty, none of it meant to be heard beyond their tables. Yet she heard everything. Leora moved through the tavern like a shadow wrapped in red. Her dress was simple, worn thin at the edges but clean. Her white hair, an unusual, almost ghostly shade, was braided neatly down her back, catching firelight like silver threads. Most patrons barely noticed her. To them, she was just another poor waitress, invisible by design. That was how she survived. Her steps were quiet, her head lowered, her expression calm. Years of hardship had taught her that being unnoticed was safer than being remarkable. She carried trays of wine and bread with steady hands, enduring sharp words, careless touches, and the kind of humiliation that came easily to those with power and no compassion. They thought her weak. They were wrong. Leora understood languages no one else remembered. Words that had not been spoken aloud in centuries whispered to her in dreams. Ancient phrases lived in her blood, rising unbidden, as natural to her as breath. She had never been taught. She had simply known. And she had learned very early to hide it. The night changed when the tavern fell unnaturally quiet. Leora felt it before she saw it, a pressure in the air like a storm drawing close. Conversations faltered. Laughter died. Even the candles seemed to bow as the door opened. The Alpha King had arrived. He filled the doorway like a living legend, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence radiating authority and danger. Long black hair framed a face carved from severity and strength. His dark eyes held the weight of wars won and enemies erased. People did not merely look at him, they submitted without realizing they were doing so. This was King Valor Stormborn. Fear. Respected. Untouchable. Beside him walked his closest advisor, a man with an easy smile and calculating eyes, too sharp, too observant. Together they moved to a private table in the corner, visible to all, yet distant from everyone. The tavern exhaled only after they sat. Leora was assigned to serve them. She approached with her tray held steady, heart calm despite the weight of the king's presence. She had served cruel men before. Power did not impress her. Only character did. Wine flowed. Time passed. The Alpha King spoke little. His voice was low, measured. His advisor filled the silence with laughter and stories, growing louder as the cups emptied. Then his gaze turned sharp, and landed on Leora. A cruel idea sparked behind his eyes. "My king," the advisor said lightly, not bothering to lower his voice. "Shall we test whether the ancient tongue still carries authority in places like this?" Valor lifted an eyebrow. "What do you suggest?" The advisor gestured lazily toward Leora. "Give the girl an order. In the old language. Something fitting her station. A game. A demonstration of superiority." The Alpha King studied Leora for a moment. She stood quietly, eyes lowered, the picture of obedience. He assumed she would not understand. No one here would. He spoke. The ancient language rolled from his tongue, formal, commanding, sharp with disdain. To the tavern it sounded impressive. Powerful. Regal. To Leora it sounded wrong. Not only was it insulting but flawed. The structure careless. The phrasing distorted. An ancient language rejected misuse. She did not move. Silence stretched. The advisor smirked, waiting for confusion, fear, submission. Instead, Leora gently set her tray down. She straightened. And the air changed. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but each syllable landed with absolute precision, spoken in the same ancient tongue, corrected, refined, returned with dignity and quiet authority. She did not raise her voice. She did not challenge him openly. She corrected him. The meaning was unmistakable. She had understood everything. The advisor's smile vanished. The Alpha King froze, his hand still mid-reach for his cup. His eyes lifted slowly to her face, not as a servant but as something unknown. Something impossible. She had spoken not just fluently, but perfectly. The tavern held its breath. "You speak the ancient language," Valor said at last. Not a question. "Yes," Leora replied simply. "That's impossible," the advisor snapped. "No common girl." Leora turned her gaze toward him. For just a moment, something ancient and unyielding burned behind her eyes. "Would you like me to recite the first binding? Or translate the inscription on your king's blade? One even your scholars no longer understand." The Alpha King's hand slowly closed around the hilt at his side. He had worn that sword his entire life. He had never known what it said. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Leora," she answered softly. Nothing more than that. He stood. The tavern shrank beneath his presence as he approached her, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell steel and storm in night air. This time when he spoke the ancient tongue he did so carefully, respectfully. "What are you really?" Leora answered in the common language so all could hear. "Someone who listens. Someone who remembers." For a long moment the Alpha King stared at her. Then he bowed his head. A king bowing to a waitress. "Come to the castle tomorrow at sunset," he said. "We will speak again." Her life shattered into something unrecognizable the moment she nodded. That night, Leora lay awake beneath the moon in her tiny rented room, ancient words whispering louder than ever. "They see you now. Everything changes. The castle that watches." Leora arrived at the castle just as the sun slipped below the horizon, staining the sky in shades of fire and blood. The fortress loomed above the capital like a silent predator. Ancient stone walls, towering spires, banners marked with the sigil of the Alpha King fluttering in the evening wind. She had walked the entire way. Not because she could not afford a carriage, she could not, but because she needed the time to steady herself. Every instinct told her she was stepping into danger. Power gathered in places like this. Power tested, consumed, and destroyed those who did not understand it. And yet, something deeper than fear pulled her forward. The guards were waiting. They did not mock her simple dress or question her presence. They had been given orders. Silent ones. They escorted her through echoing halls lined with carved stone and ancient tapestries, scenes of wars, beasts, and kings long dead. Leora felt the weight of history pressing in on her, whispering in that same forgotten language only she seemed to hear. The castle knew her. That realization unsettled her more than the guards ever could. She was brought before massive carved doors etched with symbols of moon and fang. When they opened, warmth spilled out, firelight, quiet, and the unmistakable presence of the Alpha King. King Valor was not seated on his throne. Instead, he sat beside a fire, forearms resting on his knees, posture less rigid than it had been in the tavern. Still dangerous. Still powerful. But less distant. He dismissed everyone except his advisor, who lingered in the shadows with a thinly veiled look of hostility. "Sit," Valor said. Not an order. Not a threat. Leora sat. For a long moment the Alpha King said nothing. He studied her the way a general studies an unknown battlefield, not with arrogance but with caution. "I spent today with my scholars," he finally said. "Men who have dedicated their lives to the ancient tongue. None of them speak it the way you do." Leora folded her hands in her lap. "I never studied it." The advisor scoffed. "Convenient." Valor lifted a hand. Silence fell immediately. "How?" he asked simply. Leora inhaled slowly. "It was always there. In dreams at first. Then in waking moments. Words came to me like memories that were not mine. I tried to ignore them. I tried to be normal." "Why?" Valor asked. "Because being different is dangerous," she replied softly. "People fear what they don't understand. Especially when it comes from someone with no power." Something shifted in the king's expression. Regret, perhaps. Recognition. "You were humiliated last night," he said. "By me." Leora met his gaze, unflinching. "Yes." "You had every right to stay silent." "Yes." "Then why didn't you?" Her answer was quiet but unwavering. "Because the ancient language deserves respect. And because I was tired of shrinking." For the first time Valor smiled, not cruelly, not proudly, but with something like admiration. "You corrected a king," he said. "Not to shame me, but to restore meaning." The advisor stepped forward. "My king, this is dangerous. If she truly holds this knowledge, she could. She could help us," Valor interrupted sharply. "Or she could already be ruling us in secret." Instead, she poured wine. He turned back to Leora. "Why a tavern?" She hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Because it taught me how people really are. Who lies. Who pretends. Who abuses power when they think no one important is watching." Valor leaned forward. "And what do you see here?" Leora paused. Then, a place full of truths spoken in half-words. Rituals repeated without understanding. And fear. The advisor stiffened. Valor exhaled slowly. "Stay." The word landed heavy. "Not as a prisoner," he added. "As my advisor. My translator. My equal in this matter." Leora's heart thundered. "If I refuse?" "You walk free." He meant it. She searched his face for deception and found none. Only curiosity. And something else she did not yet dare name. "I'll stay," she said. That night, Leora was given chambers larger than any space she had ever known. Servants waited on her, though she asked them not to. Sleep did not come easily. The castle whispered too loudly. Days turned into weeks. She worked beside Valor in the great library, 3 levels of forgotten knowledge. She corrected translations that had shaped history incorrectly. Rituals once spoken blindly revealed new meanings. Forgotten warnings resurfaced. Valor listened. He learned. And slowly, carefully he changed. He remembered how she took her tea. He ensured no one spoke down to her. He watched the court watch her. And Leora began to feel something she had never known before. Safety. But beneath it, danger stirred. She began to sense things. Lies tasted bitter in the air. Loyalty felt warm. Betrayal felt cold, sharp as a blade against her skin. And always, the same presence lingered. The advisor. One night, buried in a crumbling text, Leora found a phrase that made her breath catch. Moonbound. A woman born to hear truth. A bridge between power and conscience. Her hands trembled as she realized. This wasn't random. This was destiny waking up. And somewhere in the castle someone knew it, and feared it. The truth that breaks kings. The castle no longer slept for Leora. At night, when torches dimmed and footsteps faded, the walls whispered louder than ever. Ancient words brushed the edges of her thoughts, carrying warnings she could not yet fully interpret. What had once been a quiet gift had become something sharper, heavier, like a blade that could not be put down once drawn. The moonbound was awakening. Leora moved through the corridors with calm purpose, but inside she was unraveling. She felt things now, truth and falsehood as clearly as heat and cold. A servant who bowed too deeply while hiding resentment. A noble who smiled while calculating betrayal. And beneath it all, a constant pressure like rot spreading beneath stone. Someone close to the king was lying. She tried to ignore it at first, convincing herself it was exhaustion, that the castle was simply overwhelming. But the sensation returned again and again, strongest whenever the Alpha King discussed matters of war or border security. Always nearby. Always listening. The advisor. Leora hated herself for noticing it. For suspecting someone Valor trusted so completely. The man he had fought beside. The man who had stood at his side when he claimed the throne. And yet, the ancient language never lied. One evening in the library, as Valor studied a map spread across a heavy oak table, Leora felt it again. A sudden chill, sharp enough to steal her breath. A lie had just been spoken somewhere nearby. Not by Valor. She turned slowly. The advisor stood in the doorway, watching them with his usual easy expression. Too easy. Too smooth. "I'll leave you," he said pleasantly. "You two seem busy." After he left, Leora could no longer concentrate. The symbols on the page blurred. Her hands trembled. "Something's wrong," Valor said quietly. She looked up, startled. He was watching her closely now, truly watching. "I didn't say anything," she replied. "You didn't have to," he said. "What do you feel?" The question was dangerous. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet." Valor nodded, trusting her silence. That night, Leora followed the whispers. She found hidden markings carved into the stone behind a forgotten tapestry. Messages disguised as ritual notes. Conversations held in the ancient tongue, spoken sloppily, carelessly, assuming no one truly understood. She understood everything. Over days she pieced it together. Routes. Timings. Names. Lives quietly marked for sacrifice. The truth was unbearable. The advisor was selling Valor's trust piece by piece. Leora did not sleep. She reread everything, desperate to be wrong. But the ancient language rejected denial as fiercely as it rejected lies. Finally she went to Valor. He was standing alone by the window when she entered, crown discarded, shoulders heavy. In moments like this he did not look like a king. He looked like a man carrying too much weight. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. He turned. Instantly alert. "Then tell me." Her voice shook despite her resolve. "Someone is betraying you." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Valor's jaw tightened. "Who?" She swallowed. "The one you trust most." He didn't speak. Didn't deny it. Just stared at her as if she had struck him. "Say it," he said quietly. "It's him," she whispered. "Your advisor." Valor stepped back as though the floor had given way beneath him. Pain flashed across his face, raw, unguarded. "You're wrong," he said hoarsely. "I wish I were." She showed him everything. Translations, codes, patterns, meanings only the ancient tongue revealed. As she spoke, the firelight cast shadows across Vaylor's face, deepening every line carved by duty and loss. When she finished, he looked utterly broken. "He was my brother," Vaylor said. "I trusted him with my life." Leora reached for him without thinking, stopping just short of touching his arm. "I know." For a long moment he didn't move. Then suddenly he turned away, anger crashing through him like a storm. He swept the table clear, maps scattering to the floor. "I humiliated you," he said bitterly. "And you repay me with truth that destroys me." She stepped closer. "Because you deserve the truth." He turned back to her, eyes burning. "And if you're wrong?" "I'm not," she said gently. "But I would give anything to be." The storm broke. Vaylor crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hand rose, trembling, not in violence but restraint. Then, slowly, he cupped her face with a tenderness that shattered her heart. "You could have stayed silent," he said. "You could have protected yourself." She leaned into his touch. "I chose you." Something in him gave way. He kissed her, not in hunger, not in conquest, but in desperation, in gratitude, in grief. It was the kiss of a man who had been alone for too long, finding shelter in someone who saw him completely. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I trust you," he said, "even if it costs me everything." Together they set the trap. A false campaign. A false route. A lie spoken aloud to only one man. 3 nights later, under the cover of darkness, Vaylor and Leora followed the advisor through secret passages to the abandoned watchtower. From the shadows, they watched as he delivered the king's secrets to an enemy envoy. The truth revealed itself without mercy. When Vaylor stepped into the torchlight, his voice was no longer warm. It was iron. "You were my brother," he said, "and you chose power over loyalty." The advisor's rage turned toward Leora. "This is her doing. She poisoned you against me." Vaylor didn't even look at him. "She opened my eyes." The guards closed in. When the traitor was dragged away, screaming curses into the night, Vaylor stood unmoving, until the echoes faded. Then his strength collapsed. Leora took his hands, held him, anchored him as the pain finally reached him. "I'm here," she whispered. And for the first time since becoming king, Vaylor allowed himself to lean on someone else. The queen who was never seen. The dawn after the betrayal felt different. The castle stood unchanged in stone and steel, yet something fundamental had shifted within its walls. Guards spoke more softly. Courtiers moved more carefully. Whispers followed Leora wherever she went, not of mockery, not of suspicion, but of awe. The poor waitress was gone. The woman who had uncovered treason now walked openly beside the Alpha King. Vaylor had not slept. Neither had Leora. Grief and responsibility had tangled through the night, leaving them both quiet, thoughtful, and bound by something deeper than words. When the sun rose, Vaylor called the High Council. And for the first time in generations he did not sit alone on the throne. Leora stood at his side. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Nobles who had once ignored her could not meet her eyes. Those who had dismissed her as insignificant now felt the weight of her presence pressing down on them. The traitor was brought forward in chains. The advisor who had once laughed and schemed now looked small, terrified, exposed. He ranted. He blamed. He cursed Leora with venom in his voice, calling her witch, deceiver, servant who forgot her place. Vaylor let him speak. Then the Alpha King stood. "You betrayed your king," Vaylor said, his voice calm and devastating. "You sold lives for ambition. You hid behind friendship and tradition." He turned to Leora. "Speak." All eyes snapped to her. Leora inhaled slowly and spoke in the ancient language, not loudly, not angrily, but with flawless clarity. The words echoed through the chamber, resonating in the bones of the castle itself. She recited the binding laws of loyalty. The sacred oaths broken. The consequences written by the first rulers. There was no denying it. The ancient tongue judged the traitor. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Justice was swift. The traitor was stripped of title, power, and name, exiled to live forgotten, just as he had once tried to erase others. No execution. No spectacle. A punishment far crueler for a man who had craved recognition above all else. Instant karma. As he was dragged away, his final scream echoed uselessly against stone. The court bowed. Not to the king. To her. Later that night, Vaylor found Leora alone on the battlements, staring out at the city lights below. She still wore the same red dress she had worn the night they met. No jewels, no crown, no illusion of grandeur. You could have asked for anything, Valor said softly. Power. Wealth. Protection. She smiled faintly. I only wanted truth. He stepped beside her. The ancient texts are clear now. The moonbound was never meant to stand behind a throne. She turned to him. No. She was meant to stand beside it. Valor went to one knee. Not as a king performing ceremony, but as a man choosing with his whole heart. I once tried to humiliate you, he said quietly. I spoke without respect. I judged by appearance. And you answered with dignity instead of hatred. He looked up at her, eyes dark and unguarded. You made me a better ruler. Better man. And I do not wish to rule without you. Tears filled Leora's eyes. I was invisible my entire life. You were never invisible, Valor replied. The world simply did not know how to look. She placed her hand in his. And for the first time the ancient language whispered not warnings, but peace. The coronation was simple. No conquest. No bloodshed. Just a king and a woman who had once poured wine in silence, now crowned as queen, not because of birth but because of character. The people loved her. Because she remembered them. Because she had been one of them. And whenever Valor spoke now, he spoke carefully. With humility. With respect. Knowing that power without compassion was nothing, but compassion guided by strength could change the world.